Well, listen, we are really excited about the week ahead, and right now we are thrilled about Allan Calarco. So it is my pleasure to introduce our first keynote speaker of the conference. Al has been associated with the Center for Creative Leadership for over 20 years. He currently serves as a Global Solutions faculty member and executive coach. He provides program design, team and group facilitation, and executive coaching primarily in the health sector for the Center's work in societal advancement. Now, he's the lead faculty member for several key clients around the world and delivers on these clients for the very diverse portfolio of CCL. They include the World Bank, Habitat for Humanity, Deloitte, the United States Postal Service, and the World Food Program. Now, as a certified CCL executive coach, Al brings a practical approach to work, helping individuals translate theories into application. That's what he's going to do for us today. So everybody, please welcome Allan Calarco. Come on up, Al. Thank you very much. I thought you were going to dance on the way up.
It's my favorite song. A couple of things. One is I have a couple of notes. I usually do a keynote address, but as I was sitting in the back, I was reminded of a few things that I think would be really good reminders about this topic of innovation. One is this idea of mentorship. So I would encourage you to ask a person who you think is successful if they had a mentor in their life. Because the research is clear that successful people almost always can thank someone who helped them along the way. So I'd encourage you to take advantage of opportunities for people who've been successful in the profession and build a mentoring relationship, because it's a key differentiator between people who are successful and people who, quite frankly, derail professionally as well. Secondly, I worked in higher education for 20 years. I worked in housing and residence halls and conference services for 20 years. And we had food service as well. In fact, my career in college started on the food service line in the cafeteria as an undergraduate. A couple things about that. One is I was lucky enough to have bosses who always believed in professional development and personal development. I've been pretty lucky. Secondly, I had a vice president who believed in the 3 R's. He said you needed to retreat so that you could renew, so that you're able to return. And he believed, as I do, that conferences like this give you an opportunity to sit next to, engage with, and have conversations with people who get you and understand the work that you're doing and the challenges that you're doing. So I'd encourage you to take full advantage of that. And if you are sitting close to somebody you know really well, at least invite a third person into the audience so that you have an opportunity to talk about it and renew a little bit so that you're able to return. Now, when I was working at UNC Chapel Hill, which I know it's risky to mention Chapel Hill when I'm in Villanova territory, but I did grow up in Pennsylvania. I'm a native of Pennsylvania. So I took a student group on a retreat to the beach of North Carolina, which is pretty spectacular. But we were going down this road, Old Highway 54, and there's a town in North Carolina called Fuquay-Varina. And all the way there, my colleague was arguing with me as to whether the name of the town was Fuquay or Fuqua, because if you're from Duke, it's Fuqua. Is it Varina or Varina? And so we decide to stop at a restaurant, and Max walks up to this woman who works at the restaurant and says to this woman, true story, ma'am, tell me real slowly how you pronounce the name of this place. And she looked right at him and said, Hardee's. That's a true story. It's a true story, and I've told that joke for 30 years. Caroline, if this isn't going well, get that wine started and pass it from the back of the room, and we'll take it from there. Now, before I get started with the rest of the presentation, I have a question for you. One of the secrets to people being successful is that they get good feedback throughout their life. And when you interview or interact with or coach people who are successful executives, they'll tell you that they've always been open to feedback, to hearing what they do. So I'm going to ask you a question, and this is your opportunity to participate. I'd like you to stand up if you think you get enough feedback to be successful in your career. This would be the audience participation part of the. So look around the room. Interesting. And you're not unlike most other people we deal with. Secondly, stand up if you believe you give the people who work with you enough feedback so that they're successful in their careers and jobs. So feedback is a powerful tool. And what I would encourage you to think about doing as we begin to talk about innovation is stop giving feedback to people about what they did and start talking to them about how they did it. Right? So think about behaviors that successful people do, and when you give feedback to somebody, give them a little bit of a hint about not what they did, but how they did it. Because you might not be able to change a lot of things in your life, but you can actually change behavior, and it's hard work. And anyone who tells you it's not hard work has never tried to change behavior. And a simple example is, I was astonished when I lost a younger brother to lung cancer, and I was in the oncology center at the hospital, and there were doctors and nurses standing outside smoking. Right? Behavior is hard to change. And most of us are hardwired by a series of experiences, and we're going to talk a little bit about that when we talk about innovation. Okay? A plug for Glisser. Ben worked with me to put some polls in this presentation. We're going to ask you some questions. You'll be able to take the polls and answer the questions, and we'll see some real-time feedback about what you're thinking. And the thing I like about this tool is that it allows you to participate in this presentation. And the reason I bring that up is because, remember, at the end of the week, when you evaluate this presentation, you're really giving feedback to yourself because you actively participated in the program. And if you need words to describe the participation, I'll be glad to help you with that. Let's talk about innovation. VUCA. Anyone ever heard the term before? Yeah. It comes from a military model, and what it stands for is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And I actually have somebody I'm coaching who said that's how he would define Monday morning in basket. That's everything he gets over the weekend. There are people who are happy with him, people who are angry with him, people who don't know what to do. He told me, I encouraged him as I was coaching him, that his job as a leader was teaching people how to fish, not to fish for them. And he said, you don't understand. He said, I first have to tell them where the river is and what a fish looks like and what a fishing pole looks like, right? So he said this really describes his life. I'll also tell you that one of the things we now have has complicated it. This. I'm old enough to remember when they gave me this and told me this was going to simplify my life. Right? I was really going to like this. And I was telling the folks last night at dinner that I remembered for a period of time, I moved for about 6 months to Singapore, and I had to get rid of an iPhone, and I had to go back to using a BlackBerry. Right? And I couldn't believe that for years I had actually had a BlackBerry and it had worked, and I couldn't remember anything about it. But this has complicated life because I now have access to you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And there's a wear and tear that this is putting on all of us. And a simple example of a recent survey that was done in looking at people's CAT scans when their phone rings. It's the same reaction as someone calling you by name. It has the same chemical reaction as someone calling you by name. And that when they survey people who look at their phones, they'll say to them, how many times in a day do you believe you look at your phone? And people say things like, oh, I don't know, 10, 20. And it's more like 85. 85 times a day. And they'll tell you they're just checking the time. Oh, no, it's just time. I'm just checking on time. So I'd encourage you to know the power of this, the usefulness of it, and the utility of it as well, and know when to turn it off and know when to put it away, because it's having an impact on you that's probably unintended. I went to dinner at a colleague's house the other day. Everyone, phone in a bowl by the door when dinner starts. The whole family. Put phones for 1 hour, and they believe that 3 times a week it's important for them to sit at the table and speak to each other because it's spun so much out of control. Now, the other thing these phones have done for us is it's ratcheted up the expectation of innovation and change and transition. I can remember sending an email to somebody on a Monday morning, and actually giving them a few days to respond to it. Now I get an email, and then I get a reminder that they sent me the email, and then I get a notice that they'd like them to know when I open that email, and then another email before lunch that tells me I haven't answered their email yet. All right, so we've complicated this idea of innovation, so let's talk about it. All right, be innovative. So this cartoon speaks to me because mostly what we deal with is organizations that have every intention of being innovative, but all they do is shackle people, tie them, muzzle them, put blindfolds on them, take their resources away, and tell them things like, be innovative now. I have a rock on my desk and it says, God grant me patience now. Right? Same thing. You ask people to be innovative, and you give them no tools, no time, no space, no place to do it, and certainly no authority to do anything in a different kind of way. Okay? So that's my favorite cartoon. So I want to see how innovative do you think you are, and this is your opportunity for audience participation. So take out the app. How innovative do you think you are? You'll see a little scale there. And then Ben in the back is going to help me in populating that. Get up and dance while you're doing it. Let me know when you're ready, Ben. Oh, about half of you. About half of you say a 3 on a scale of 1 to 5. So if this was a room full of 6-year-olds, and I said to them, how innovative are you? What do you think the answer would be? 5s. It would be the same if you had a room full of 6-year-olds and you said to them, how many of you can dance? All of them can dance. How many of you can sing? All of them can sing. And so it is with innovation, too, that I think what tends to happen is somewhere somebody told me I'm not very innovative. And it's the same impact as when we tell kids that they're not good at math. Right? And so how innovative do you think you are? So the next question, now we'll ask you about your organization. How innovative is your organization? Go ahead and take the survey. Remember, you gave yourself a 3. How innovative is Vanilla Ice? Uh-oh. Uh-oh, still going. Wow. 40% of the group believes the organization is at a 4, yet half of you rated yourselves at 3. So who's doing all that innovative work? Right? Just something to think about as we go forward. A couple of myths about innovation. The myths are on your left side of that column. Flash of insight, brilliant idea, individualistic, new knowledge. It's all about the invention, originality, look to the future. Internal, specifically for an R&D, a research and development, new products, all about learning. The truth is, the other column is the reality. Innovation comes from immersion, and what that means is by totally immersing yourself in a new idea or a new project, you're going to fail early, but you're going to fail often. And the reason why most of us are afraid to take innovative approaches is because of the risk of failure. And so what I would ask you is, as a boss or a supervisor or a manager or a leader, what messages do you give the people who work for you every day about how innovative they can be and what kind of risks can they take? Every bit of research about the future of innovation is about collaboration. Admitting ignorance, mostly about implementation. Anybody in here ever have a really good idea that never went anywhere? Yeah, I have them every day. I'll go into a place and I'll see something and say, God, I thought of that 2 years ago, right? There's something about innovation the idea of innovation and coming up with a new idea and mapping that with actual implementation. So you know this. There are people who are great strategic leaders. There are great strategic thinkers, great strategic influencers, and then great people who are good at implementation. And for the question for you is, how good are you at implementation of these great ideas that you come up with all of the time? It's about borrowing. You know, Starbucks came from a coffee shop in Italy. It wasn't a new idea. Having people sit around comfortably and talk over a coffee shop is not a new idea. And so you look at borrowing all of the time. You don't look to the future, you look sideways and backwards. And I'm going to give you an example of this. My colleague and I, Larry Hicks is his name, he's since retired. We were working in housing and residence halls with the maintenance and housekeeping staff who were having a war over leaking showers in the residence halls. And they were trying to figure out why the water kept coming underneath the shower curtain out into the bathroom, which is a housekeeping nightmare, right? It's also a facilities nightmare for structural reasons. So we get this group of maintenance people and housekeepers, and that's how they sat. And we began to brainstorm with them. And if you're a maintenance man, what you do is you build up the threshold. You get bricks and mortar and just make a little step there and you step over it. That's what you do. And if you're a housekeeper, you tell them to lower the curtain rod, right? Just take that curtain and lower it. But what they don't consider is people who are over 1.85 meters or 6 feet, and you'd hit your head on the shower curtain every day. My colleague Larry, who was standing right next to me, said, why don't they just buy a bigger shower curtain? And there was complete silence in the room. Because from a maintenance perspective, that's not the solution they were used to. And from a housekeeping perspective, that wasn't the solution you were used to. So what you have to do is look sideways. Network, be open to innovation. It's about everything. It's not about new products. And it's about unlearning. And one of the things you want to reflect on with innovation is what's your mindset about learning, right? In this room right now, there are travelers, learners, and prisoners. Right? Some people come to these things because they have to or think they're supposed to. And then there are people here because they believe it opens the lens for them. And the question you have to answer for yourself about innovation is, what kind of learner are you? Right? All right. Organizational culture eats innovation strategy for lunch. The reason I bring this up is because if you want to have a strategy of innovation and you want to be seen as an innovative partner, the question I would ask you is, what's your organizational culture about innovation, about risk-taking, about taking risks and trying new things? So yell out for me, what are the killer phrases you hear when you want to try something new? What are they? We've tried that before. It won't work. It costs too much money. Takes too long. We don't have time to do that. It has to go through legal. Like passing that ball around should have gone through legal. Right? It's a risk management nightmare, and you hear that all the time. We could never do that. So we were doing an innovation of one of our leadership development programs at the center, and every time someone brought up an idea, someone would use the killer phrase from the back of the room. You know, that'll never work. We've tried that before. You weren't here in 91, right? We're going to free up your future. I tried all the, because we don't fire people at the center. We only free up their future. It's true. So they would sit in the back of the room and you would have to dodge these bullets all the time. And my good colleague, Ellen Van Belser, who you don't know, but you might know a book she wrote. She wrote a book in the late 80s called Breaking the Glass Ceiling. And she wrote the book about Will Women Succeed in Corporate America? That was Ellen's original work. And she decided after a break that we put this chart paper on the wall, and she asked every one of us to write down everything we thought was untouchable, that we couldn't change. And the wall was full of things that were not changeable. And then we went through them one at a time and X'd out the ones that were actually not true. And it was pretty remarkable. But our organizational culture was pretty risk adverse, and we didn't want to try any new things. Our company's been in business for about 50 years now, and we were founded by a grant through the Smith Richardson Foundation. And how many of you know who H. Smith Richardson was? H. Smith Richardson's father invented something that you probably have used in your life, or if you have children, you've used it on them. When children aren't feeling very well, I know my mom used to open up this little blue bottle, and there was an ointment in that bottle, and she would put it under my nose, or rub it on my chest, or put it in a warm basin of water and put a towel over my head, right? What's it called? Vicks. It was actually called Richardson's Croup and Pneumonia Salve. And he was a marketing genius as well, and he decided that they needed to change the name of their number one product, and they called it Vicks Vapor Rub after his uncle Vic. That's who the product is named after. And Vicks Vapor Rub was invented in Greensboro, North Carolina, and shipped by the boxcar load out and sold then off to Procter & Gamble for a large sum of money. But our distinct competency is leadership development. That's what we spend our time talking to people about, and organizational development. And it's because organizations are so bad at understanding their culture, we believe that we'll be around forever. So ask yourself, what's the culture that's causing you not to take risks and be innovative? And have an honest conversation with colleagues about what's the risk quotient you can take and how much risk are you allowed to take. And you'll get a sense of what your organization is causing to happen, which is good, and what it's causing, quite frankly, to happen that's causing things not to work out so well. So there's a frustrating gap between performance and expectations. 94% of the chief executive officers who come to our Leadership at the Peak program, 94% of them say that innovation is important. And only 14% of them say their organization is good at it. 94%. So it's not about identifying the problem, it's about identifying solutions and some tools, and I'm going to help you with those. Now, raise your hand if you know what this is. Raise your hand if you have no idea what this is. There you go. I've never seen one, but I have an older brother who had one of these, so So what's it called? Slide ruler. And you think to yourself, I have no idea what that is or even used for, but if you watch the movie Apollo 13, you'll see that they brought the astronauts back to the United States, landed safely by doing calculations on this. Now, before you think this was the beginning of time or when the Earth was cooling, this is 50 years ago. 50 years ago, this was the best that we had. Let's take a trip down memory lane. Ooh. Punch cards. I remember going to the chemistry building, which is where the computer was, and there it was. It was small enough to fit in this room. There's the first laptop. There's the other laptop. Then we got a little better, a little better, a little better. You see where it's gone? Innovation here is not about coming up with something new. It's about improving what already existed, right? It's taking an idea and extrapolating it out. And I'll tell you one technique with this. If I asked you now how to improve this, my guess is you'd have suggestions in how to improve this. But the first suggestions you would offer say more about the current or the past than the future. And so when I work with groups, I tell them to write them down on Post-it notes, put them up on the wall, and then we take the ones down that, quite frankly, are more about today and yesterday than they are about the future. I could do the same thing with you if I asked you to tell me a better use or a better invention for a bathtub. Who here could improve a bathtub? Give me an improvement. Preset temperature. Right. Make it self-cleaning. I'm sorry? Make it hold the consistent temperature. So it not only gives you the temperature you would prefer, as soon as you get in the tub, it maintains that temperature. Make it big enough before. That's obviously someone from the UK, right? They do everything together. When I lived in Belgium for 7 years. Raise your hand if you know where Belgium is. Nope, no one knows where Belgium is, right? It's a great little country. I loved living there. It's right next to the Netherlands. Yeah. I loved living there. It was a great experience. And I would tell you that my beliefs about innovation and changes happened as a result of travel. So 10 years ago in Brussels at my bank, we used a chip on my credit card. 10 years ago. And in my little credit union in Greensboro, you know, their gums are bleeding. This is like the most stressful thing that's ever happened to them. And they keep saying this newfangled technology. And I'm thinking, I don't know, I had one of those cards 10 years ago. It works fine, right? And I think in some ways we're really fast followers and we think we're being innovative. And the truth is we're not being innovative. We're just doing something that existed before. Rhonda's in the back. Rhonda was telling me she went to Japan last year. Or was it last year, Rhonda? This year. So many years ago when I went to Japan, two things amazed me about innovative products. When you left the hotel room, you had to take your key card out of the wall, which turned off all the power. And we're like, ooh, yeah, but you know, I need a light on. I have to have a light on when I come home, right? So the lights go out. And then when you just wash your hands, you want to wash your hands after you use the bathroom, the spigot was on the back of the toilet. And so you rinse your hands and the water goes in the tank and is reused for a flushing device. That's 10 years ago. But think about it, they're an island, right? Water conservation is an important driver for them. These aren't new cutting edge now, but they were when you saw them. A couple of things. So McKinsey, you know the name McKinsey. You might not know the name Continuum. Does anybody know the company Continuum? Great little innovator company. So Continuum was called in by Procter & Gamble to help to work with their chemists to create a new way of cleaning floors. Because the challenge was when you bring a group of chemists together and you tell them to come up with a new way of cleaning floors, what do they come up with? More chemicals. So they worked with them and they invented the Swiffer. And they brought this odd person out, a person who knew nothing about the problem, and they helped them solve it in a way in which they couldn't even imagine. Okay? So for you, as you think about repurposing your work, are you putting the same players around the table, just kind of rearranging the deck chairs of the same 5 people, or might you bring an odd person in who knows nothing about what you do, and you ask them, what do they make of this idea? The Navy's used that procedure for years. It's called odd man out. So who's your odd person out? Who's the voice at the table you ought to invite who's not there now? Right? And it might be interesting if you pulled in a couple of customers and just sat and listened to them talk about it instead of you telling them what they should do. All right? So I travel all the time, as you can imagine. My colleagues tend to like that because I'm not in the office. But I think the example I give is I think with airlines, we got the baggage thing wrong. They should charge you to carry your bag on, not to check it. Right? Put your hand up if you've been on an airplane that's delayed because people have to now check bags. And put your hand up if you paid $25 at the counter and now you go down to the gate and they're giving away free luggage carrying. And then they wonder why people are mad at them. Right? So, senior executives, almost unanimously, 94% say that people in corporate culture are the most important drivers of innovation. And the biggest request that Continuum's been getting lately, we have plenty of good ideas. Our problem is that we have trouble getting them through the organization and into the marketplace. So we were doing work with IKEA, the Swedish company. I actually got to go up to Älmhult, Sweden, which is a beautiful little town in the northern part of Sweden, and work with one of their design teams. And the vice president called us in to spend some time with the design team talking about innovation to execution. So we did a little continuum exercise with them where we evaluate, in essence, their change index, kind of their tolerance for change and ambiguity. And what happened was, on one end of this continuum, you're a conserver, and that means you're a conserver of resources. You tend to look more about the past than the future. On the other end are originators. clever, open-ended, always open, new idea. So where do you think the designers for IKEA were? All originators. All of them. But the vice president, she's a conserver. And so she looked at her whole team, literally almost across the room from her, and she said, now do you see why I don't need any more ideas? Because that's what they were good at, generating ideas, but not good at the execution or figuring out how to get them through the organization. I have a colleague, I didn't do that. Did the lights suddenly go up? Oh, good, I thought I had a stroke or something. That's pretty frightening. We need a little warning about that. I'm at an age you have to be careful about those things. But she didn't need any more ideas. And actually, she was frustrated with them about this inability to move it through the system. And so what we talk to them about as innovators and about their design team is how to get to yes and how to ease the condition of the boss to be able to say yes. How to make it easy for her to say yes. And that's what we spend time doing. Most organizations struggle because they can't get it past the executive committee. They can't get the budget dollars to do it. So let's talk a little bit about that. Here are some companies people list as innovative. It's not exhaustive. But Ben's going to help me, and I'm going to ask you between Apple and Dell or Barnes & Noble and Amazon, Ford and Toyota, which one of the two pairs are innovative. So let's start that, Ben. Apple or Dell? All right. No surprise here, right? Right? When you looked at the evolution of that computer, it went from large, clunky computers to then these light, easy to carry, easy to use, swipe everything, touch everything, it comes on automatically. So this is an answer we get pretty typical, that Apple is beating Dell in innovation. The next question is, which company is more innovative, Amazon or Barnes & Noble? Make sure you get my good side. Like, was it Taylor Swift who fell? I can make up who fell? No, Carrie Underwood. Somebody got hurt and said, don't take pictures of my right side. It's a little joke here. Which company is more innovative? Amazon. And what's happening to Barnes & Noble? Anybody still have a Barnes & Noble? Yeah, we still have one in Greensboro, actually, which is where I live. And I go in there sometimes and I think this is the same store it was 12 years ago. Right? So where's the new idea coming from? And what has Amazon done? Anybody here use Amazon? I want my stock options to go up. Everybody should be using Amazon. No, I don't have any stock. But I'll tell you the thing that blows my mind about Amazon is I will literally go online and order something, and it is on my porch tomorrow, the next day. The next day. So you see, it'd be interesting to see what happens to all the big box stores. I have a good friend who works in shopping centers and shopping malls. They're disappearing. They're completely disappearing. And the pendulum will probably swing. People will start to then say, you know, it was nice to be out socially with people and go shopping. But for right now, they're just about eating everyone's lunch. I do a lot of work in Seattle. You know, they're adding 38,000 jobs. Seattle's one of the 2 fastest growing cities in the country. And most of that is Microsoft and Apple. The third one, which company is more innovative, Ford or Toyota? It's interesting because Toyota gets about half, and then the other 2 seem to be almost close to equally split there. Innovative, and it depends on what you're looking for in a car, right? And when you buy a new car, one of the things you realize is, how did I ever live with my other car? Because it seems so new and innovative. Somebody give me an addition to a car recently that you have very much enjoy. Air-conditioned or heated seats? Air-conditioned seats. Shut up. Air-conditioned seats. Oh, I like the idea. I live in North Carolina. What else? Rain adjusting. Let me get a pen. Hold on. Rain adjusting. Good idea. What else? I'm sorry? A backup camera. Wi-Fi in your car, which I didn't like the other morning when the person pulled out in front of me, because she was on her phone, drinking her Starbucks, putting on her makeup, coming around the corner. That's what she told the police officer. I would say nothing. I would say, I have to talk to an attorney. She was like, oh, yeah, I do it every morning. I'm running late. And I'm thinking, I'm going to say nothing. It's going to be fine. What else in a car? I'm sorry? A heating steering wheel? Parking assist? My sister could use that, yeah. Parking assist. All right. So the interesting thing is, who in here works in the car industry? No one. Give me a next great idea for a car. A flying car. Did you ever see the Jetsons? Yeah. Self-maintenance car. Self-washing car. Right? Right. So if you think about it, if you just leave brainstorming out open a little bit, right? One of the ways in which you can do brainstorming that's really fun with groups is you take two things that seem to be unrelated and you ask people to make a third thing, right? So I take a flower and a rock. So somebody give me something that has the properties of a flower and a rock but isn't a flower or a rock. A cactus? Mahatma Gandhi? Who said that? Mike. Why did you say that? And you know right now there are the people in the room going, huh? Right? So the simple example of a rock and a flower. Last time I did it, somebody said coral. Somebody said a Shakespearean play. Somebody said falling in love. Right? Soft, supple, and you have to make hard choices sometimes. Right? And then there are the traditional ones. People will say things like a headstone in a cemetery that looks like a flower. Well, that's not very creative or innovative, but it gets you closer to the properties of both. So in your work, ask people, take two things that seem to be unrelated and ask them to put it together and make a third thing. And what would that thing look like? Okay? And hotels did that with environmental, right? And what they try to do in the room is they try to persuade you to do something. What do they try to persuade you to do? Reuse the towels. And what they found is if they can tell you that the people in this hotel 75% of the time actually recycle their towels, there's a greater percentage that you'll do it. And if they can tell you that in that room the last month, every bed night spent there, people recycled their towels, there's a greater percentage of chance that you'll do it. Okay? And that's all about mindset. That's what that's about. It's about setting the right mindset for people in an organization when you want them to be innovative. So, what do we say? What do we mean when we say creativity and innovation? We get asked this all the time. We're the Center for Creative Leadership. And how does innovation link to leadership? I'll talk a little bit more about that one. But here's how they link together. Leadership offers three basic outcomes. If leadership is present, three things occur: direction, alignment, and commitment. And direction is just much like it sounds. Where are we going? Alignment is the right people on the right bus in the right seats going in the right direction. And commitment, which is the one that trips people up, is not enthusiasm for your job. Commitment is that I'll be willing to put down my silo walls to benefit the greater organization. I have resources that you need. I'm not going to use them. I'll give them to you. That's commitment. And where most organizations fail is in this commitment mode, because there are silos and there are glass walls and organizational limits and institutional games that are played and organizational politics. Okay? So what happens is leadership promotes direction, alignment, commitment, which causes a climate and culture that stimulates intrinsic motivation. I do it because it's the right thing to do, which creates new ideas, which, when implemented, leads to innovation. Now remember, you'll have all these slides. So what's the difference between creativity and innovation? Creativity is coming up with a new and useful idea. Innovation is something that adds value. So it's not innovative if it doesn't move the needle. Whatever needle that is that you're measuring it ought to move the needle. And that the difference between innovation and creativity is that creativity is coming up with the new idea. Innovation is transforming that new idea into action. How many of you have an innovation challenge? How many of you have something that's keeping you up at night? Right? That's another way of thinking about it. Something that I fundamentally have to change because it's keeping me awake at night. When I coach people, here are some of the questions I ask them when I'm getting them to think about what their innovative challenges are. What are your competitors doing that make you envious? What are some ideas that your team has developed that need to be embraced by the rest of the organization? What are some of the concepts that you know would benefit the organization if you would just implement them? What's broken in your organization that you have a solution for? What are some concepts that haven't gained traction in the other parts of the organization? I asked them these 5 questions, and before I meet with them, I actually asked them to answer these questions, send me the answers, and then when I work with them one-on-one, we actually go back to these and talk about how many of these are true versus perception. How many of these are within my sphere of control, and how many of these do I have to influence other people to be able to do them? Okay? Back to your glisser. I want you to name an innovative person. And then what will happen here is the screen will just begin to be populated with names of people. And I'll ask that you glance at that and see if you see any names repeated. Shout out to Ben Franklin. Oh, thank you. Is my mom here? Is my mom here? Thanks, Mom. Oh, I see there's some names here you know. Yeah? And we know the devices that said these names, so we'll be coming to find you. So there are some commonalities. What are some of the common names? Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, right? Ben Franklin. You know, when I was in university, I had the chance, it was 1976. I was a child. It was 1976, and we did the play 1776. And I got to play one of the characters in the play, and I knew so little. And here I am, a kid from Pennsylvania. I knew so little about the remarkable contributions of Benjamin Franklin. First Postmaster General, right? Bifocals, scientist, politician, statesman, father of our country, right? Remarkable man. Jefferson, great musician, brilliant writer. And when you study those people, they were remarkable not only in their time, they would be remarkable in any time. Bill Gates. There's a great book written in the 70s called When Dreams and Heroes Die. And I'm of a certain generation that if you had asked me who was my hero, more often than not, I could give you a couple of names of people I admired. And what this book is saying is that younger people are struggling to find that hero in their life. And if you take out of the mix athletes or actors and actresses, there's almost no one left for them. Because seems to be a void of great leaders today. Okay? So Thomas Edison, Martin Luther King. Remember, Martin Luther King never said, I have a strategic plan. Right? He said, I have a dream. That's innovation. So how do you approach challenges? What's your mindset? If I said to you, we're all going skydiving, some of you would say that's never going to happen. And some of you might say, that's a great idea. I've been always wanting to do that. Let's make it work. Now, that's the extreme example. But if someone comes up to you with a great idea, what's your mindset about other people's great ideas? And sometimes we struggle with that great idea because it's not ours. And they might get the credit for it. And so we're going to talk a little bit about mindset. Research tells us that the creative process is actually universal. There are discrete steps. Each step requires a different mental skill. Most of us prefer some of those steps over others. And those biases show up as strengths and potential blind spots when solving problems. I ask you to think about your own biases about innovation. And some of us really don't even realize that we have unconscious bias in all of a big part of our lives, about the ways in which we interact with people. And I was listening this morning because of the Starbucks incident with the CEO of Starbucks. He was on Good Morning America. And at the end of his talk, one of the things that blew me away was he accepted full responsibility. And it was startling to me how clear he was in that they made a mistake and the buck stops with him. And then he said, we have to understand the power of unconscious bias in our workers, and we clearly have to do more training on unconscious bias. And I was amazed by it. We all have to know what those are. So let's take a look at all of you. This is what happens when in organizations you have departments that do innovation. You'll have people say, no, I'm just a big idea guy. I don't do implementation. And one of the secrets to implementation, the secrets to innovation is you have to have people understand that innovation is everybody's business. It's not just the Department of Research, the marketing people, right? It's everyone. And there are great innovative ideas that are out there resting every time. All right, so we have a few more minutes, so let's do this. Everybody stand up. I'm going to teach you two techniques that help you get energy. We have about 15 minutes left, and we'll power through. One is this. It's a yoga move. Put your hands behind your back like this and look to the ceiling as far back as you can go. And hold it for a few seconds. Go as far as you can, as far as you're comfortable. And stretch, push yourself to stretch as far as you can. And come forward when you're ready. That's one technique. It's a great technique. Secondly is the one is called accelerated breathing. And so what you're going to do is breathe through your nose as quickly as possible. It sounds like this. Go ahead. God, you can get them to do anything. So keep breathing. Right? All right, thanks. Take a seat. Now, those two techniques are yoga techniques. And the second one is simply called ventilation. And here's what I'm going to say to you about innovation. A trick about being innovative is about changing up the environment a little bit. So I now have a stand-up desk. Thank you very much. No, sit down. It's embarrassing. I have a stand-up desk, and I was one of those people who walked by people's offices and said, oh, yeah, look at you, Mr. Stand-up Desk. But I went for a physical, and my doctor was pretty clear. He said something like, Al, get off the couch. No, he said, eat more greens. I have a new doctor now. He said to me, you have to figure out a way to move more during the day. You sit all day. And you go from meeting to meeting. He said, have you thought about a stand-up desk? So I went on eBay and bought one. I put it in my office, and a year and a half later, I've never used my desk chair. And I'm here to tell you that simple change of standing up and physically moving every once in a while has fundamentally changed my energy in the day. I feel like I'm more alert, more attentive, and I feel like the days aren't as difficult for me, and it was a very subtle change. And what this is about is that was me hiding behind my style. It was just easier to be at my desk. But the truth is, I can't imagine that I'll ever go back to a seated desk. And I know I can put it down, right? You can just simply put it down and sit at the desk if you want to. Even in conference calls now, I stand, and I got a camera for the upper monitor so that I can actually stand while I'm talking to people. So I'd encourage you to think about what are you hiding behind when you think about innovation or change? What are the styles that you have to change about yourself? I'm going to go on to this. Where do your ideas come from? That idea came from my doctor, who happens to be a friend. I knew him as a student, and he's just a terrific doctor. And he's really good about helping you in subtle ways think about ways to just improve the quality of your life. That's all. So where do your ideas come from? For innovation to happen, leaders need to search for the value in all new ideas, not just the ones I like, or not just the ones that people I like recommend. Right? We all have an affinity to like the ideas from people who sound just like us. And I would encourage you to think about, when's the last time you hired somebody because they really brought a different voice? We tend to interview people, and if they answer the question just like we would, we go back into that little meeting and say, I really liked him or her. They'll be a good fit because they're exactly like us. We've hired us. That's what we've done. When's the last time somebody gave a contrary opinion in an interview and you said, you know what, that's a voice that's underrepresented in our meetings, and it'll be a challenge for us, but that's who we need to hire. All right. So what's the point? That's pretty scary looking. The point is actually an acronym. So I have an idea. These are my two dogs. Actually, they're not my dogs. I'm gone too much to have a dog. Here's my idea, though. I have a great new vending machine idea. Into the vending machine, you put your quarters, and then you put your dog in the vending machine. And your dog gets washed and dried. What do you think? Going to invest? No. What about the PETA people? Oh, my God, right? So that's just an idea, but here's how I would work with you if I was working with your group. We use POINT, which is pluses, opportunities, issues, and new thinking. So what were the pluses of that idea? And let me walk you through this right now. And if you don't have a lot of time, you can do pint, and if you have less time, just do pie. So what are the pluses of this idea? I'm sorry? Clean dog. Easy. I'm not wet. It's a couple of quarters. All right? What are the opportunities? The dog, that could be a disadvantage. The dog gets stuck in there, right? Needing money to do it. Who said that's a great one, actually, right? Who carries change around with them? Quarters, right? So there are some opportunities you'd want to think about. The third one is, are there any issues with this idea? What if you have a big dog? Like, could my Great Dane go in there as well as my Corgi? Will it cost? Is it more quarters for the Great Dane than it is for the Dachshund? Right? I would hope so, right? So there are lots of issues. And then are there any new thinking come out of this? Did it generate any new ideas for you? And you're thinking, now who would come up with this idea? And it's actually real. It's a $30,000 machine designed by vets and engineers. You put your dog into the machine. The dog goes through a 4-minute wash, 30-second rinse, and a 20-minute dry. Price is $20, and it's in Vancouver, and they do 150 dogs a month. And if you don't believe me, you can go to YouTube, and you can watch the video of them doing this. And actually, the pets seem to actually enjoy it. It was bizarre. I couldn't believe it the first time I heard about this. But remember, when I first showed this to you, you rolled your eyes and thought, well, who would do that? Right? And the truth is it already exists. And they're washing 150 dogs a month at $200, and they're actually vets. So why use POINT? Because it gives you a little bit of a critical thinking tool. It can make any idea workable, because remember, there might not be many pluses, but it could lead to other thinking or new thinking. So even if you don't use the idea, you have a little bit of a process you can use to get people to move through an innovative process. You can make any idea workable. Investments in development, you have to develop alignment. Help others see the value of your idea and the rationale, and then help team debrief performance to learn and improve, because I'm not poking fun at your idea. We're all using the same process to unpack it and evaluate it, okay? And the way you do that is when I work with groups, and I do brainstorming, because brainstorming even drives me crazy, because brainstorming has to have a point of why are you doing it and what's the end of the brainstorming, right? Because in here, if I said, let's just brainstorm 20 new ideas, some of you would come up with 50. And if I never gave you an ending point, you would just keep going and going and going. And what happens with the ideas is they become cyclical and they come back to the first ideas again. So what I do with groups is I tell them they aim for 20 ideas. One person writes all of the ideas so they can be seen by the group. They don't judge them, they don't edit them, they don't summarize them or otherwise improve the idea, and you don't discuss anything about the idea. You let everybody put their 20 ideas up, and then you begin the process of unpacking it. Because if you don't do that, as soon as I put my idea up, you're going to take the cheap shot. We've tried that. In 1991, when we were new, we started that idea, right? That went full cycle here. You know, that horse is dead and we're not going to dig it up again. But if I tell you to hold your critique for a while, you might just wait and see something happen. So that's an idea. You'll have a copy of this. These are the 10 most common types of innovation that exist. A profit model, one simple example, the ability to make money. How many of you know Costco? Yeah, how many of you are Costco members? There's a little bit of a theme emerging here. Costco, Amazon. So I pay Costco $75 a year for a membership. And what do I get for that membership? What do I get? I get lots of toilet paper and paper towels. What do I get the right to walk into the building. That's it. And Costco last year made $2 billion on that idea. On a membership, right? And then there are networks, there's structure, process, you see all of the other ones. And I would encourage you with your team, put your organization into the equation. What would make money for your organization? What would connect with others to create value? How do you align talent and assets? And you can ask yourself all of these. I've not failed, I've just found 1,000 ways that don't work. Thomas Edison, who did some pretty amazing things. Some factors about prototyping, just a quick go through these. Go fast, make it cheap, start early, learn constantly. I've given people paper, masking tape, markers, and asked them to build things, and it's unbelievable to me what people will come up with in prototyping. This is the prototype that led to the development of that automobile on the lower right corner. 3 guys sitting in a design studio with desk chairs. That was a prototype of another chair that led to this chair. Prototype your most promising solutions. What do you want to learn? What type of prototyping activity would fit in? Do you have to create it or can you try it? Can you give somebody a little bit of time to try and experiment and get some feedback? And what did you find out by prototyping your most promising solution? It's just a suggestion for you. The road to wisdom, well, it's plain and simple to express. Err and err again, but less and less and less. Learn from your mistakes. Sometimes people say, well, you know, I'm doing this because I have 20 years of experience. And when I interact with them, I actually don't think they have 20 years of experience. I think they have 1 year of experience 20 times. They make the same mistakes every year. Same ideas tried last year. Okay? Connect ideas to ideas, ideas to people, people to people. You know that makes sense, actually. So we did research on innovation, and we found that effective organizations have a formal innovation strategy, and they have a budget dedicated to innovation. And that shouldn't surprise anybody. Ideas and resources. Ineffective organizations, they have a culture that does not support innovation. They lack a direction for innovation, and they lack the leaders who encourage innovation. Which of the following are threats to innovation? New ideas are risky. New ideas can change power structures. New ideas are most often not your own. Go ahead and vote. That's pretty ominous music. Wow. That's better. Send me forget-me-not. All right, all of the above. You got it. It's all of the above. And so when you're trying to figure out in your own organization which one of those, it would be interesting to just ask people to vote on which one of those gets in the way in your organization. But it is all of the above, and it's clear about that. Here's your role in supporting that. Connect people, tap your network. Is there another idea or person that this idea and person might connect with in some way? How might you influence enhancement to the strategy or structure? You see that? And as a leader, how could you run interference for somebody who's actually trying to do something in a new, a different way? Because that's what good leadership does. So think about what actions you would commit to. What I would ask you to do is think about one thing that you've been thinking about doing, and for some reason you've not gotten to it. And ask yourself, how might I implement this new idea? Thank you all. It was a pleasure to spend some time with all of you. Thank you.